I don't want to pick favorites, but Thursday is my favorite day of the week for a couple of reasons. First off, it is the pre-weekend. Nate, I don't know if you were like this. Nate Bauer, senior editor, Blue White Illustrated, joining the show. We're jumping right into the conversation. Do you remember there was a certain pressure in college, especially, and in your early 20s, when Friday hits, you've got to have fun. Like, it is now your job to have a blast. At least that was the way it felt in college to me. Is that
Sure.
just me, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Like by the time that you get to Friday, you're saying that the weekend had to kick off on Thursday or you weren't doing it right?
No. I'm saying that Thursday, in that environment of like Friday, Saturday especially, is like, where are you going? What party are you going to? Who are you going to go out with?
Sure.
What friend group? You got to make sure you're having that fun after the week of work. Thursday had no pressure. There was no pressure on Thursday. I loved Thursdays because it didn't come with all of that stuff. But yeah, you're right. It was the pre-fun to the weekend, so it basically made the weekend start on Thursday, which is why I'm here and not doing other things with math or science.
Yeah, I was going to say I was so focused on my studies that I don't even know what you're talking about like that.
Anyway, one of the reasons I like Thursdays is because we get to kick off our shoes and talk. Just hang out here on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. As I said, that's Nate Bauer. We are answering your questions on the Mailbag Show. We get into some interesting topics. We'll get in depth with some things. But the first thing, Nate, I want to start with is that seltzer you're drinking, by the way. Excellent choice. Excellent choice. I get the cans of it because I get I need like a whole week's worth. But I want to get to what you were thinking about, what you were talking about this week. What's on your mind with Penn State football? I know you had a good article yesterday about predicting breakouts for the spring.
Yeah, it's, so this is like the week of doom we're counting down the clock to spring practice. I think that you, me, and everyone else that follows Penn State football just loves the excitement of things actually happening, right? Like, yes, they're doing winter workouts right now. This week in particular is spring break, but spring practice starts in, let me check the clock here, 11 days. And so it's kind of that countdown of, hey, let's talk about what we're expecting before spring practice so that by the time that spring practice comes, we can talk about whether we were right or not.
Yeah.
And, this is kind of that lead-in period.
Yes. And I was so excited for things to start happening in my mind, I accidentally eliminated next week. I was going right to the start of spring practice on Monday. I tend to do that when, I just don't want there to be a week. My mind just erases it. And the dates don't matter. Going back again to my days in college and my focus and how it tends to not be exactly where it's supposed to be at all times. So you wrote something yesterday, though, about the breakout candidates, and I want to talk about the safety position, because you and I had a great conversation, I thought, about what are we supposed to expect at that position. So I know you wrote about Jaylen Reed. Tell me your thoughts about him as a potential breakout, and then we'll get into kind of the depth chart and positions and what we are thinking about that to start spring ball in 11 days.
Yeah, so the thing that I wrote yesterday was about second-year players, right? So guys who the first one I did was first-year players, so specifically early enrollees. And so I followed it with second-year guys who, it kind of happens every year where there is a player or two or three who may not have had a complete breakout their true freshman season, but played, right? So saw some action, some sparingly, maybe a little bit more.
Yep. And it happens more now with the 4-game rule too. So you can see guys in certain situations, but they really only played a couple hundred snaps.
Correct. And so Jalen Reed is perfect for that model of, hey, this is his opportunity this spring he has his feet wet. He has been through a season of practices. He has and been involved in those practices, right?
Yep.
James Franklin talked about the fact that he had specific packages, right, on the defense.
Late
third down, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So So he's a guy who, yeah, like I think his final tally of defensive snaps was somewhere in the low 100s, right? Like 107, 111, something like that. But now he's got this opportunity. He's a guy who I'm not sure, and you can speak more to this. They're going to have to figure some things out in this in the safety room specifically, Anthony Poindexter, because you've got a guy in TIG Brown who's coming back. There's no question he's a starter. He's a star. The highest expectations that there could be attached for him. But outside of that, one, there aren't a ton of scholarship safeties on the roster this spring. There are a ton coming in with the incoming class and with a transfer from Lackawanna. But just in general, there aren't that many bodies, scholarship bodies at safety this spring. And so you've got Jaylen Reed, who is vying for an opportunity. You've got Keaton Ellis, who is right, like his career is advanced. I mean, it seems like just yesterday that he got to Penn State, but he's been around for a while. And so this feels like this is his opportunity to win a job or not. John Sutherland is moving to linebacker, right? That takes one out.
I'm trying really hard not to roll my eyes, so I'm just staring directly at the camera. Continue.
Yeah. Well, look, it is what it is. They've made that announcement and they're doing it. And so that leaves Zaki Wheatley as kind of the fourth guy. I mean, maybe my numbers are off. I'm not exactly sure, but I only see 4 scholarship safeties in the bank for this spring.
Yeah.
Which leaves this prime wide window for someone to assert themselves and to fit in next to TIG Brown.
Yep. Sebastian Konstantini is the only guy I would say that kind of intrigues me, of somebody who's gotten a lot of run even before the numbers here. You heard a little bit about him last season in spring ball, but again, like you said, only 4 scholarship guys. And how to me, what's interesting is how are they going to divvy up based on that who plays what position? That is really interesting because you've got 2 young guys and 2 veteran guys. But I don't know that they all fit perfectly into 2 guys, a young guy and a veteran guy at each position. So I was thinking, and you were kind of picking my brain about, so where's Jalen Reed at what position? And the way the season ended, he was playing that boundary role where Jaquan Brisker was before he opted out of the bowl game. So what they did is Jaylen Reed came in and replaced him, and TIG Brown was in his same spot at that field position. But is that what you want to do? To me, that's the question, is do you want to do that? Because the way that before the bowl, TIG was talking to, I actually had a good amount of time of a one-on-one basically with him during one of the Zoom sessions where it was just him and I was asking him questions and talking to him about what he wanted for next year if he came back, wink. And one of the things he talked about is being more physical in the run game, being more of a presence behind the line of scrimmage, which screams to me that he's going to bulk up and play the boundary role. And then I see him in the spring over at the at Max Testing Day, and he looked noticeably bigger. Now, the problem is, because of the pandemic, I had never met TIG Brown in person. So I don't really know for a fact, but after watching him on screen for 2 years, he did seem like he was bigger and stronger. So does that throw our whole preconceived notion about who's playing where up in the air a little bit, knowing they need to have veteran guy at each position, and Keaton Ellis had been that field safety?
Yeah, I mean, possibly, right? Given some of the feedback that I have gotten through the years, at least as it pertained to last season, it was kind of this, Brisker wants to be closer to the ball. He's better closer to the ball. He had been playing out of position as the free 2 years ago. And so TIG Brown coming into the equation solved that because he's more of a center fielder. He likes pass coverage, right? And so certainly I think that you can speak to this more eloquently than I can, but I'm not sure why that I'm not sure why TIG Brown would want to make that move.
Right. Right.
Right. Or if Penn State needs it, but maybe Penn State does, right? Maybe Penn State needs somebody who it feels is more reliable and consistent that can fit into that role than a guy like Jaylen Reed, who would seem to play the same position. Right. So
yes. So the to me, the problem is not where TIG Brown and Jaylen Reed fit together. It's who's the other boundary safety. Because if you had kept Jonathan Sutherland there, you could say Sutherland is our backup, or he's going to split time with the young sophomore. Because Penn State has always said they want to be 4 deep in at the safety position. But does that mean Keaton Ellis has to move over to the boundary? Because Zaki Wheatley's coming from corner. So is he making the transition all the way over to that strong safety position, which to back up and just give and I know I'm talking a lot with my hands in my head, but this is what happens when I get excited. My very Italian grandfather. When you're divvying up the responsibilities of the safeties, you have the boundary and the field safety, and they're roughly strong and free. So the field is the free safety, the boundary is the strong safety, but both in Penn State's system have to be able to play interchangeably at times. That's how you disguise coverage. Now, and again, the other layer on top of this is that was with Brent Pry. So is there a more defined role with Manny Diaz where we don't care about disguising? What we're going to do is we're going to find another way to confuse the quarterback, or we're going to be so good at what we do that you're not going to throw deep and you're going to get... So there's a couple of different layers to this of a little bit of opaqueness about what might happen. But really, to me, it's who's the backup boundary safety, because the other two fit really well together, given that Chuck Losey said that Jaylen Reed got bigger and stronger this offseason, which was one of my notes coming out of the bowl game, is he can't play there yet. He's not strong enough to take on in the run game. So I think that is going to be what I'm looking for early on in spring practice.
Yeah, but I mean, if he is bigger, stronger, and more prepared to take on that role, then maybe that's the fit, right? Is Keaton Ellis and Wheatley as the free. And again, like we're just talking about this spring, there is ample opportunity for a kid like Mills to come in and, right? I mean,
that's the real answer. Right there.
Exactly. So everybody who's come from, and I'm just everybody, 3 guys. That have played safety, right? I mean, they've got this little string that they've got going and they like it, this little pipeline, but they've all played their first year on campus at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it would be, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but certainly you would think that Mills would be in a position to contribute right away and potentially be a 5th guy there.
Yeah. And one of the things Zaki Wheatley's dad is very active on Twitter, and one of the things he said recently was that he wasn't moved because of any other reason other than they needed help at the safety position. Physically, they liked him at corner. My question is, when Mills gets into the building, I want to see Wheatley play corner eventually. I've never seen Penn State switch somebody back to corner after they move to safety. Because I think there's value in that long physical corner like Joey Porter Jr. And if you can keep a pipeline of those guys going on that boundary side corner, I think that's super valuable. I love this conversation. I could go the whole show on this, but we do have to honor our agreement and get to the questions that we promised that we would answer on the show. So here's our BWI mailbag with Nate and T. Frank. And finally, Nate's back after a couple weeks of not being here. It was touch and go today, so I appreciate you, Nate, of being able to be on the show today to honor our agreement that we would answer questions once a week during the offseason. So thank you for making it happen. I know it was a big move. It was a monumental thing. You had to move some things around to do this.
Who knew that not only do college students have spring break, but so do preschoolers?
What?
Just
they don't know.
I give up.
No. That only happens in State College. There's no such thing of that in rural Pennsylvania where I came from. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
My daughter like spring break,
training them super early. First off, Losey's mustache from our BWI message board. Epic name. That immediately gets the answer. Gets the question answered. So 3 questions. He says, "Hey T Frank, I mustache you 3 questions. The first one is just for me. Is your last name hyphenated or is Frank your middle name? Great question. Lots of people are confused by this. I have 2 first names. So let me throw this back up here. Any second now. There you go, bud. There we go. You see down here my Twitter handle, at Thomas Frank Carr. I'm not a weirdo. I don't go by my middle name. I'm not like some pretentious English author. Thomas Frank is my first name. Carr is my last name. My mom gave me 2 first names, and there's no hyphen. I just have 2 first names as a first name. And I came to BWI from radio in State College, and I was known as T. Frank. I actually got that nickname in college from my radio broadcasting professor. So I just kept that as my kind of like a stage name, like Eminem or Jay-Z. I'm T. Frank. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that answers that question for you. And then he goes on to ask the other questions. Let me get this back up here. Too early to tell, but what's your way too early prediction for the running back and tight end room this next year for the guys on the roster? He asked specifically, so there's a lot of questions here beyond his just question. Does Lee make the NFL leap if he's good this year? I don't think so. Do you think Ford and Holmes jump into the portal if somebody else takes their spot? Same with the tight end room. So let's just discuss running back and tight end. Running back is something you and I have pointed to of if there's going to be a transfer out of the program, it might come from that room. Do you still feel that way this spring?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I like, obviously you have to wait and see how things pan out, but the time, like the ace up your sleeve of having a red shirt available for certain players is like, that's kind of gone, right?
Yeah.
Like Devin Ford isn't going to redshirt. Keziah Holmes already redshirted. Kevon Lee is not going to redshirt. So that leaves you the 2 freshmen in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who my presumption is neither one of those guys want to, or they would be crazy to redshirt either one of them. And
if I had to, it's funny. Katron Allen has the game to translate immediately from like it's on tape, it looks professional. Mm-hmm. But I would redshirt him over Nick Singleton because you're only getting Nick Singleton for 3 years. That's Correct. It. Like I'm calling the NFL shot there already. So yep. Katron Allen, I have more of a question of does he have early exit ability? He's again a little more like Noah Cain to me. He'd be the guy at redshirt, but he might be the best of the young players early on in his career because of what he did at IMG Academy. So there's no real good answer between those two of redshirting either.
You just want to see where things shake out, right? I mean, by the end of this spring, I mean, if they don't already know what they have with Devin Ford, I don't believe that. I think that they do know what they have with Devin Ford. And frankly, dare I say it, I mean, he was going to start that Iowa game, or he did start that Iowa game before he got hurt, right? Like there have been opportunities, things that they have liked about what Devin Ford has done. It's just a matter of consistency and staying healthy. Staying healthy is a huge part of this.
Yeah, and taking a step forward. So coming in, his to me, his evaluation, his upside was all built on can he get bigger? And so far throughout his career, he has not been able to crest much over 200 pounds. He does not have the running style to not break tackles. He's not elusive. He is a straight line speed and power guy, but the power seems to be lacking. He buries people with effort. But I think this spring to see something from him, it has to be more of that. There has to be more of that.
Did we not call him at one point the best pass protecting running back that they had?
Did we? Probably.
I think we may have last year at one point. I don't know. It's a little tricky, but it's going to be interesting because 5 is like just over the line, or 5 is the line. Certainly you can't have 6, and you saw that with Noah Cain transferring out, but 5, I think they can probably live with. 4 is maybe more realistic given not what the program wants, but what these guys want individually. Right. I mean, they all want to play. You want to get on the field. And so if you don't see a pathway to that, then it might be a little bit more challenging.
I would also say that it would be pretty easy to have Nick Singleton 4th in the spring, and then all of a sudden in the fall, he's number 3, and then he's number 2, and then he's, might be splitting reps with a number 1 sort of thing, because he's a freshman. It's important to also point out that, like, right now, he might not be the best running back in the holistic sense of playing the position well, but that doesn't mean it precludes it from happening over the summer and into fall camp once he gets more comfortable. And same thing with Katron Allen. So what happens in the spring, might keep guys on the roster, might not. I don't know. And I think there's a lot of different ways they could go. So let's move on to the tight end position, because I want to get to that too. With the tight end room, he doesn't mention in his question Tyler Warren, because I don't think Brenton Strange is making any NFL leap after this year. Theo Johnson maybe, but he asked if this is a place where someone else hits the portal. I don't think that, but I don't think that we're paying enough attention to Tyler Warren this offseason, is I think where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably fair. Look, something has to improve there. And I'm not saying that they were bad last year necessarily. I just think that there were inconsistencies that need to be cleaned up, given the fact that so much of Penn State's success in recent years has been predicated on the success of the tight end position. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly in terms of NFL leap, like I don't see that today from anyone in that room. It's just a matter of, like, what is that position going to look like? How are they going to fit into Mike Yurcich's offense in the second go round? Sean Clifford's reliance on or not of that position. There's a lot up in the air there, I think.
Yeah. Then he asks that this is still Losi's mustache. This is the only time. So if you ask a question again, this is the only time I'm going through a 3-part question, because he did lead with the conversation about my first name, which is the only time I ever bring it up. I will never bring that up unless somebody asks, because it's such a convoluted conversation that I've had since I was 6 years old. So finally here he asks, taking a look at those rooms for the class of 23, in recruiting. Take 2 at each position, or will they only take 1 running back, seeing as what they have at the position right now for the next 3 to 4 years, which, again, I'm going to laugh at the idea of him being here for 4 years. I think it's 2 at each position. And I know, Nate, you're not as in tune with the recruiting stuff. You focused on the team proper. But they've had 5 tight ends come through the class of 2023 at that position. Well, really, they've had 2 that have moved positions now, where they've had Joey Schlaffer has been their tight end. That's stayed a tight end in that group. Then Matthias Barnwell has opened up his mind to the idea of playing a different position. He is now on the defensive line, and so is Neo Avery, who's switching his position to defensive end, which has been hilarious to watch this tight end room just basically manufacture defensive linemen for John Scott Jr., but I think they'll take a second tight end. I'm up in the air. I think they'll also take 2 running backs, given the number of recruits or the number of offers they've sent out recently and where they are with some guys. So I want to move on. Not to cut you off. I know you had a lot of thoughts there, Nate, on that particular topic.
No thoughts. 0.
Poncho 570. Can you name an offensive and a defensive player that would provide a big sigh of relief to the coaching staff with a big spring session? Who do you think Penn State needs, like, oh, thank goodness we saw what we wanted to out of X? Let's start on the defensive side.
You go first.
I was going to let you go first because I thought you were going to go with the obvious one of Adisa Isaac. Because normally I don't start with the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's low-hanging fruit. We don't know what Adisa Isaac is yet. So this is we have an idea. But as the 1A pass rusher, and you might not even find this out until the fall, truthfully, of we're going to find out a lot about the offensive and defensive linemen that are stepping into bigger roles this year. Isaac, there's a lot of information that we need to download over the first couple of weeks heading into then April. So that's where I'm going to start. If he looks like the guy that's going to be the next Arnold Ebiketie, or the next Odafe Owe or Shaka Toney, whatever you want to call him, that would be a huge relief, because then Penn State can, if you've got one, like we saw last year with Arnold Ebiketie, one really good pass rusher can kind of a little bit top heavy, make everything okay. Then they just
Yeah.
got to find the other pieces to support that.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I think there's quite a few options
There are.
Specific to the defensive side of the ball, right? I mean, you can
Yeah.
go through the linebacker room outside of Curtis Jacobs. You can really, I mean, Hakeem Beamon, where's he? What's his deal? I mean, he was going to start last year, right? Like, what's his position? What's his deal? Is he back? Is he playing? Is he good? Yeah, I mean, you name, like, where's PJ Mustipher? And I don't think that anybody has any expectation, obviously, of him participating this spring, but just in general, there are quite a few unknowns, health-wise, eligibility-wise, participation-wise, and quality of performance-wise, that they're going to have to figure out. I mean, Manny Diaz has his hands full on that side of the ball, even with as many intriguing / players worthy of optimism as they have. I mean, there's plenty of reason for that on that side of the ball. I don't think that there's a lack of talent necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just a more up in the air situation, I think, on the defensive side of the ball than they've had in a few years.
So sure. we have not said the names Devon Ellis or Keziah Izzard in a while.
Yeah.
I'm just interested at that. Like, the fact that you and I, I know for me specifically, I've been looking past them on the roster to what else is there. And I don't know that that's entirely fair to them. And I don't know that I'm doing it that I am ignoring them. I think it's more of like I have a defined picture of what they are. But even they are not a set thing. They are not a set entity as young players, especially Izzard, that was thrown into the fire pretty early in his career. So, offensive side of the ball, which lineman are you going to pick as a sigh of relief player?
Hang on a second. Was the question phrased as lineman? Is it limited?
Oh, offensive and defensive.
Anything.
I was reading specifically lineman in my head.
Yeah.
Again, attention to detail. I could not have started this podcast in a better way than I did, because it informs all of my mistakes that I make every day.
If it's just linemen on the offensive side of the ball,
open it up. Poncho wants to know whatever player you're thinking of.
Look, what's the slam dunk on offense?
Oh, the quarterback.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Which quarterback?
Any of them. Any of the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Seeing would be a huge sigh of relief. Although I don't. They're probably not there, right? I mean, there will be no sigh of relief given the PTSD that has been attached to that position for each of the last 3 seasons.
I also don't know that you'd have a sigh of relief if one of the backup quarterbacks challenged Sean Clifford. It's more of there's a slight sigh of relief, but in that sigh is then the tension of, what do we do with Sean now? How do we handle this? And that is it would be a good place to be. It's where you want to be, but it is also something that Penn State has, I think, struggled with when it comes to their quarterbacks, of managing having more than one option. Because we just see the evidence of the backup quarterback never gets, I think, a fair run on the field to work through some things the way that the starter has. So there's another problem there. I would say Olu Fashanu is my answer, and that's probably why I thought offensive and defensive line, because my thoughts went to those positions. If you know for a fact that Olu Fashanu can play at a level near Rasheed Walker, and I know that he got beat up a lot this year for not being great, but he wasn't bad. And if you can have that ascending from Fashanu, I think you're in a great spot.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go with some sexier picks though.
Sure.
In Singleton or Lee, either one of those guys. Actually, really anybody. Forget individual names. Open it up to position groups. and to me, there are anybody who asserts themselves as a stud at receiver, and I think maybe Parker Washington is kind of scratching at that door, but Mitchell Tinsley, right? Whatever at at receiver, you need to have arguably 3 or 4 there
Yeah.
who that you can rely on. I mean, I brought it up the other day on the message board. Penn State traditionally, and when I say traditionally, I'm talking about James Franklin's tenure at Penn State. When Penn State has 3 receivers plus a tight end, all with 25 or more receptions, they've had really good years.
Mm-hmm.
And when they haven't, they haven't.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty clear distinction in that vein. So yeah, I mean, I think they need another receiver to step up and be good and reliable. And I think they need a running back to be a stud, like to just be a star. And they haven't had a star. Maybe Nick Singleton is it. Maybe Kevon Lee is ready to be that. But in either direction, if they saw that and that was what presented itself through the course of the spring, I think that would really, really alleviate some of the pressure of how they pursue and how they approach really the rest of the summer.
It's the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. That's Nate Bauer, Senior Editor. If you're listening on a podcast version, we're doing this via YouTube as always, so the questions are up on the board. So if there's anything that I've missed to actually explain or go in depth or give the perspective of, you can always check out the YouTube channel. I do my best to read everything on screen out loud for you. But if you're watching on YouTube, you know that's all obvious. You can read all of it. So make sure you subscribe and you don't miss any of our mailbag editions here on the BWI Daily. And here's the deal I'm giving everyone this week, Nate. You can subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube and the website, and it'll cost you exactly $1 for both of those. It's a bundle deal for your spring, whatever you want to attach it to in the spring. It's spring, so that's our deal. Both of those things for just $1. Link is in the description of the video.
I'm going to sign up twice.
Ooh, bad man. Are you gonna have a shadow account so you can go and you can say really inflammatory things on the message board? Is that the point of the second account?
How do you know that I already don't?
That's a really great point.
Arguments with myself constantly.
That would be phenomenal. But seriously, though, it's a great place to come and talk about football. So if you want to have these conversations in a different form, but still have, I think, really good football conversations for the most part on the BWI message board, sign up for just $1. You get insider access to everything we do at Blue White Illustrated. And when you ask a question there for the mailbag, we get to it. So Lamgall, I think, I don't know how to pronounce some of these things. That sounds like something I'm going to make a mistake on. Hey, T. Frank, as an O-line expert, I think that might be a stretch, but thank you for saying that. What do you think the best solution at right tackle will be for next season, assuming we don't get any transfer tackle? Would you anticipate a Will Fry situation where Wallace moves to the inside and Tangwall takes over the right tackle spot? Tangwall, he thinks, is a potential All-American guard or center, but he might be the best option for O-line performance if he moves to right tackle in Lamgall's position. This is addressed to me, but I want to give you some thoughts so I don't filibuster here. So I'll let you start on this, Nate.
I mean, you filibuster. You're great at this. I think that this spring is vitally important for Phil Trautwein to figure it out, for lack of a better, right? I mean, these are the pieces that you have. How do they fit? And last season, I think that they had an idea. And look, I mean, best laid plans, right? Things always get topsy-turvy. It's never exactly what you think it's going to be by the time that the season starts or through the course of the season. But for right now, this spring, here's what you got. And what you got are quite a few players who have 2+ years in the program.
Yep.
Right. Where do they fit? He's had the time to evaluate them. He's had the time to see what they do well. He's had the time to see where they've developed and where they haven't developed. And so now it's really incumbent on him to be able to find the roles for the players that he has to make the best 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a way of saying I don't know, but he needs to.
Yes. Well, as another, and as Lamgall said, as another O-line expert and a peer of Phil Trautwein who absolutely knows as much about offensive line play as Phil Trautwein, who was an NFL offensive lineman, I'm qualified to speak on this.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, I said that on a microphone, and someone's going to take that seriously. I know for a fact that's going to come back to bite me as something that wasn't taken as a joke. Okay. With that said, I'm going to tell you a quick story. So, the last time Nate and I were on camera talking, I said, I don't know what to do with Rasheed Walker. There's a lot of things that I don't know why he plays the way he does. So, this week, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, part of the plus content that you can go read for that $1 we mentioned, is I went in and I did basically a scouting report on Rasheed Walker for the pro day and for the draft. And I found some things that I didn't notice the first couple times around when I was watching the film during the season, when I'm watching everything instead of one individual player. Rasheed took a step forward in his technical abilities last season. And I know that sounds crazy. What I'm saying is by the end of the season, he was coming out of his stance quicker, more consistently, with great pop and his hands in the right spot. I watched Phil Trautwein drill the offensive line on that stuff during the season. Nate and I talked about some of the stuff that we observed during the season, and you were describing having that drill where the bag was over your hands, right? Mm-hmm. That's teaching you to get your hands in the right spot so that they're ready to go and they're ready to engage with with a defensive lineman when he comes to you. Rasheed's problems were mental focus and follow through. So all of those things that he was being taught he was doing, until sometimes he just smacked guys in the face because his hands got too high. I see similar things with Caden Wallace. He has more physical issues at the position. I think he's a little stiff and top heavy, and that's one of the reasons why he gave up some bad pressures. But I see the technical improvement, and I see the areas where he does look like a right tackle. More so, I think, than Will Fries, who did not have the feet for the position. I do think Caden Wallace has enough athleticism where if his balance develops and his ability to play with consistent technique develops, and also they're not throwing the ball 37 times a game. He's not put in too many obvious passing situations by the fact that they have more balance, and then the fact that the quarterback gets the ball out to receivers who catch it down the field. That's another thing that I found watching some of this stuff is that the number of critical mistakes that were just physical errors, dropping the football, not being in position, not getting a block, like those are not coaching things. That's execution of your assignment. That's a problem. And I think Caden Wallace can take a step forward where there's an avenue for him to be a good right tackle. I don't think elite, but a good one. So that's where I'm aligning my expectations for this offseason, to see a better, more balanced, more nimble Caden Wallace. So that's what I want to see this spring, and I think that can prevent what you're talking about, which is playing somebody like Landon Tangwall at a position where they're not accentuating the offensive line and making things better instead of just being good. Like, there needs to be guys that are great out there, and Tangwall can be one of those. I don't know even if you move him inside if Caden Wallace is great. I think he's a good football player. So anyway, let's move on. Beaverman 72, and this is one I don't know if we did this one last week or not. So Beaverman, if you asked this one and we got to it last week, you get a double answer of this question. Aside from the offensive line, which position group underperformed most last year? Who is the chosen position group that needs to have a better year? Nate, after my 17-minute story about the offensive line, please take this one away.
Whew. Who underperformed the most last year? Quarterback. Yes.
That was going to be my answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but with caveats that are important, because that didn't happen in a vacuum. There were things that impacted specifically the offensive line, right? Yep. Had a pretty severe impact, and then not being able to make the most of the opportunities that you do have. I mean, look, like, we've been through this story and we have seen it multiple times now over the last 10 years. So none of that is unfamiliar. After that, however, and we talked about them earlier, I think the tight ends probably are really right. Like that was just a spot where it just didn't come together and it didn't happen and it didn't click the way that it needs to. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Penn State has had two, pretty like one great and then one that's up and coming. When we're talking about some of the successful seasons that they've had in 16 and 17, obviously in 19, is that the situation, right? It almost like running back.
Is this a Mike Gesicki from 2017 to 19 situation, right? Where, or was it 15, where he dropped all the balls and he was inconsistent and you could see he was open, but you couldn't trust him. And then all of a sudden he becomes an all Big Ten tight end that goes in the second round. You're saying that, are we going to see that development this year from somebody or the group at large?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so I don't know, but I think that if you're looking at underperformed, I don't know if it's underperformed based on what their actual experience was or what their talent level is, but I think underperformed to what the needs of Penn State's offense are is probably an accurate way to describe it.
Yep. And I'll just quickly about the quarterback. You're right. There are so many qualifiers to that statement, including, and this is something that I don't think I was fair enough with Sean Clifford last year about, is what does an injury do to your mental performance? How does that affect who you become when you're injured? So I don't know how the mental side of things changed for him over the course of the year, but the fact of the matter is they did. So some quarterbacks can gut through that and play injured and play great. And that's where I think the underperforming comes from, is the idea that he was not able to do that because he had to keep his head above water for that offense to survive. Fair or unfair, he is the quarterback. That was the expectation. That is not what happened. So that's kind of my view of that in particular. So let's get into... Go ahead.
I have to ask this because I'm thinking, maybe too simplistically here, but is the fact that there's 3 full seasons of film on him going to be to his detriment this season? Like, because I'm thinking back on last year, and it's not like he played great against Wisconsin, right? Like they got it done, but it wasn't a great performance. He had a great night against Auburn.
Yep.
Like that was a great night that he had. He had a really
non-conference game too.
Correct. You feel me? See where I'm going with this?
Yes, I do.
And so, sometimes I just wonder if the blueprint and the book is out.
Yes. Yes.
Because defensive, right? Like, I mean, you know what to look for. So certainly, all of these defensive coordinators know what to look for and know what to do and will feel confident in what their game plan is to kind of contain him.
Yep.
And so I just, it's going to be interesting to me to see if is there a way to kind of change your spots and change who you are.
I was having a conversation about this, and somebody brought up Clifford is better when he runs the football more, and I just was like, no, that's wrong. But I didn't have a great way to elocute it at that point. So here is the reason. Running the ball as a quarterback is one of two. It's a symptom of your offense being inefficient through the air. And it's one of two things. You either have a talent that can't throw the football effectively, so running is the better option, or you have what is the best option is it's a supplement to your running game, which is strong enough that it is a problem for the defense. Quarterbacks running the ball are supposed to, unless you have truly special players, they are supposed to just take advantage of the other team oversetting, chasing the running back, and then the back door is wide open. That's how that comes. Like, you have a defensive end that doesn't play well in space. That's kind of changed now, where defensive ends are now trained to play the read option better, and there's a better answer to that. So now, on zone options where you're getting everybody flowing so hard one way, the quarterback can come back the other, and there's a big running lane. That's the point. that you're taking advantage of what the defense is doing because the defense has to overcompensate because you're so good at something else. Penn State, if they're good at running the ball, or if Clifford becomes great at throwing the ball deep down the field, it doesn't, like, the running is the gravy. It's the whip topping. It is not it's not the answer. I think we've seen that when they try to go to it as the answer, that's when they get in trouble and Clifford gets injured because you can't do anything else. So you try the quarterback run game because it's supposed to be this cheat code, and it's just not with him specifically because he's not Cam Newton. He's not Josh Allen.
I can reflect on the last 3 years and think of some very important carries that he has had. Things that changed games for Penn State, win or lose, right? Like Penn State, people forget. Penn State was going to lose that Indiana game 2 years ago, were it not for his scramble in the fourth quarter or the third quarter, right? I mean, he had a big 35-yard touchdown. And so obviously, ultimately, they did lose that game, but I just think that there have been times where, yes, that has to be an option. He has to be physically capable of doing it, but it can't be the first option with him. I don't think that Penn State has ever presented it otherwise, like as though that's a paramount to his success. I just think that it opens things up even more for him, to be successful. So
right.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it is absolutely important for him to be able to run, but it's not. You're right to your point that it can't be the first option, because if it's the first option, it means they're stuck in the mud.
I don't think it's up to Sean Clifford whether or not he can run. It's up to the situation that dictates whether he can run or not. This next one, second to last question we're going to get to today, BWI Daily Edition. Nate, we're going to get to an hour on this show today. What airline passenger behavior annoys you the most? Nate was just on vacation, so I thought this was a perfect time from Honest Jay Paterno to get this question in. So Nate, you're as a world jet setter who travels to things for events, what bothers you the most?
To be honest with you, I was actually going to respond to this. I saw it on Twitter and was just going to say, like, hey, let's not wait for the show. Let's just get right into it. And the answer, because I experienced quite a bit of this, people who don't, and I don't know when the last time that you traveled is, but people who don't turn their sound off on their cell phones right now is like a thing. People listen to videos, like they watch a video on a plane without headphones on. It is, I mean, it's unconscionable. And then the second one, and this one really was very, I mean, it ate me at my core. I saw a guy put his overhead bag in lengthwise and up with the handle extended.
What?
It was the most egregious use of overhead space that I've ever seen in my life, and I can't get over it, and I won't get over it. It was rude. Listen, everybody, they go in sideways, standing up, right? Like that's how you put those bags in, and then you can fit as many of them as you possibly can because the overhead space is important. So
yes, it is.
Just a tip. Just throwing that out there. What do you got? So
I have been on a plane before. I have absolutely been on a plane. I don't really have any hot takes about this. I would say just generally rudeness.
Sure.
And I'm thinking specifically of people that are rude to the airline attendants.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm not trying to be like, wave a flag for anybody, but everyone is stressed traveling. You're not special. Like your stress is not anything special. So just deal with it like an adult and like a stoic American and just be quiet until you're off the plane, and don't think that you're going to make a stand for any sort of anything. Like, just be on the plane and get off the plane in an orderly manner. I guess if there was another thing that I don't like, and this is coming from my wife is a very anxious traveler, very anxious. If you aren't prepared to get off the plane, and you haven't at least made a plan, like even if you're just sitting there doing nothing, but you don't have a plan of efficient movement through the cabin of, okay, when that person gets up, I'm going to then get up, and then I'm going to grab my bag, and like, we're going to do this dance. If you're just sitting there like, I didn't think about this at all, people do have to get to connecting flights about a mile away through the Detroit airport, specifically if you're coming from State College, in about 15 minutes. So that is very rude.
Can I go?
Sure.
Can I go with one more?
Sure.
Fragrant food.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Like don't eat shrimp scampi on an airplane. I'm not saying that happened.
Don't bring a bagged tuna fish that's warm now on the plane.
All fish should be off limits on an airplane, period.
If there isn't water nearby, if there isn't a body of water, you can't have fish. Let's make that the rule. That's a great rule. Okay. Last question today, Nate. This one, I think, is a great place from where we just came from, not from the airplanes. Got a question for you. It says, Rad Dad Jeans, our buddy back with the bedazzled jeans, who, by the way, his is not his but his Twitter name is just This is AH capitalized. I'm going to pronounce it dramatically and say that it's He says, all right, I've got one for you. What are the chances we see a pre-Iowa injury Sean Clifford again?
High, I think. What do you think? I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't want to wax poetic for forever here, but I think that his potential to be that guy is always there. I think it was there in 19. I think it was there in 20. I think it was there last year, which is to say streaky, like pretty good and then pretty not good. It just like he's not. I think he has moments and quarters where he is a bad quarterback. I think he has quarters and moments where he is an above average quarterback. And so I think that is what happened and what we saw in the first 5 games last season. And then after that, I think that the injury hurt that opportunity for him. And so like, I don't change the question to, is there a chance that we see Sean Clifford be better, like demonstrably better than he was the first 5 games last year? I think the answer is no. Yeah.
So
I'm not trying to be like a jerk. I don't know. Like I just heard that and it was like, oh man, you sound like a real jerk.
You can no, but you talked about this. You politely said it is the book out on Sean Clifford. The book was out on Sean Clifford last year. You know, like 2020 he was figured out in 2020, and then it's to what degree can you execute that in the years that follow. And you mentioned Auburn. Auburn rushed 3 and 4 the entire game. That was it. People threw bodies at Sean Clifford, and when you did that, he didn't respond well. Sometimes he responded great, but it's about the consistency, and that's where he had to take a step forward. We talked about this time and time again. So then the question becomes, can you see pre-Iowa Sean Clifford again? Yes, if he's got a great pocket and receivers get open and the first read is open. And even if the first read isn't open, if he's got a clean pocket and somebody comes open again, or he works well with somebody in scramble situations, all of those things will be pre-injury Sean Clifford. It just becomes those situations where you get pressure, and he's got to decide in that moment if he's going to be the guy that throws the ball up against Maryland and it's a pick 6, or if he's going to be the guy that against Wisconsin, he threw the ball out of bounds and lived to see another day.
Yep.
That's the game with Sean Clifford, is how he responds in those moments. And that's the game for every quarterback. but they have varying degrees of success against pressure.
And varying degrees of successful offensive lines.
Yep.
And tight ends and running backs who are the people that they're relying on to be able to get that clean look. And I think, and again, I mean, I don't, it's early. We'll see what happens, but is your anticipation that Penn State's offensive line and pass protection is so many light years better that those situations won't present themselves, or that won't be the plan for opponents of Penn State this season? I don't.
They can have higher highs. I would say this is my expectation, is that the talent is increasing on the field. I know I'm putting too much on a redshirt freshman, but Landon Tangwall just moves differently. And if Hunter Norzad comes in and plays to the level that he can as a more physical run blocker, they should have more movement in the run game because of those two guys. The tackles just have to hold their water. The center just has to not, and I guess I'm putting all this on the guards, and that's a bad place to go from a football analysis standpoint. So I guess the longer I talk, the more I'm on your side of, I think that, I'll stick to my guns. Their higher highs will be evident, but there will still be maybe the same result because there are mistakes and there are things that just you can't clean up in 1 year in transition.
Yeah, and maybe the floor is higher, right? Like maybe the absolute depths of the floor is better than it was before.
Yep. Well, that's where Fashanu comes in, because he's got to have that floor that's better, and the high highs might be he doesn't give up any pressures in a game. So yeah,
it doesn't change the fact though that you're gonna get Ohio State's defensive line.
Yeah,
right. Like they're still coming,
yep.
And so no matter how good you are, there are going to be times and moments in a game where you've got to be able at that position to handle that. Yep. And you don't have to be. I mean, it's literally what you just said. It's not that you have to turn that blitz into a broken play touchdown. It's that you have to not get crushed.
It's good for you, and it's good for the offense. That's for sure.
You can't give up the fumble six. Like it can't happen, and it's too many times. And it's one of those things where you can pick out these instances and say, oh, well, if it wasn't for this one play, if it wasn't for this one interception at the goal line, backed up against the goal line at Iowa, if it wasn't for the interception at Indiana backed up against the goal line, if it wasn't for the fumble six, if it wasn't for, and all of a sudden, now you're talking not about specific instances. You're talking about patterns.
You sound almost like you're grading him on a play-by-play basis. Like somehow this is an analytics conversation now, Nate. That consistency is more important than highlights. I'm having a hard time here. I think we're going to have to start arguing about something like fourth down decisions.
I'll go for it every time.
No, I'm playing a dangerous game with my camera that the battery's about to die. So let's end the show now. We're not talking about fourth down decisions. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Nate Bauer killing it today on our mailbag episode. Make sure you subscribe to Blue White Illustrated. Follow us on Twitter so you know every Wednesday night you can get your question in on Twitter, or if you're a message board member, you can get them in directly, bluewhiteillustrated.com. We'll talk to you tomorrow.